Hello, everybody. Thanks so much for watching. Really happy you're here. I'm here today with Josh Atwell and Amy Lewis, who are here to talk with us about imposter syndrome. I know that this is something that I deal with quite a bit, especially coming into the tech world, not in tech. I got a religious studies degree. It's really easy to feel that, you don't fit in, or that, you don't belong, or that you're a fraud. And so the other day, it was really impacting me quite a bit, and I posted on Twitter, and I was like, like the imposter syndrome's hitting really hard tonight. And Josh reached out and was just like, hey, I know a thing or two about that. And I was like, well, would you love to be on Twitch? And I was like, and he was like, sure. So please welcome them. And thanks so much for being here. So I'm going to go ahead and kick it over to Amy and then Josh, and they will introduce themselves.
Whew. Well, hi, I'm Amy Lewis. I guess I'm also an imposter to technology by that marker. I'm English poli sci, so at least people do have religion about technology. So there's a little more corollary there, Kelly, than I've got. And I've known Josh for a million years, and we have struggled together on how to make your way in this wacky world and not fall prey to imposter syndrome, which is some of what we talk about. Is it's a tag team, it's a tag team sport, right? If you're some of it is involving keeping yourself out of that dark place, but always casting that lifeline to somebody else. So
Definitely.
great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you. Alrighty, Josh.
Hi, I'm Josh. As Amy mentioned, we've worked together. We've been partners in crime for a very, very long time, and it was. I'll share one little tidbit. A few years ago, someone made the comment like, "What is it that motivates you in the work that you do? Like, what is it that you take the most pride in, that you actively feel like you push towards the most?" And I came to the realization it was helping other people be more successful in their work and in their careers, right? And Amy and I have worked on these types of topics for so long, but so I'm excited to have an opportunity to talk and kind of share some of the stuff that we've learned from our own experiences, the things that we've learned from our research, and hopefully provide some insight to other folks on how to deal with this. In fact, we have a talk that will be at SplunkConf 2020. I think it's in late September, October. My team, some people are going to kill me for not knowing the date, but it's the imposter syndrome first aid kit, and we're to talk specifically about how to identify and take care of it. So we'll talk about some of those things tonight.
Awesome. Cool. Well, if we just want to go ahead and jump into it, thanks everybody for being here. So I'll just start off with what kind of got you interested in the subject specifically of imposter syndrome? Was there any defining event, or was it something you were just, interested in?
I'm not really qualified for this.
I think that's it. A buddy and mentor of mine has this awesome coursework on transitions, and you think of transitions so often as something negative and scary, and she's got this really cool coursework around how it's an opportunity. And anytime you have a transition, and to your point, Kelly, just kicking it off, like if you had trained for one thing and go into a different role professionally, or if you suddenly have new responsibilities at work, or we're in the midst of a pandemic. There's tons of things that you can look at through the lens of transition right now.
Yeah.
That's when I think you have the risk of self-doubt. And the worst part of it is the time that you need your confidence the most. That's when it tends to strike like lightning, right? Is you absolutely need to be at your very best. And I think it's why people have such a horror of public speaking.
Yeah.
Because that moment you're supposed to turn it on and shine, like kabam, cat's got your tongue. So that's kind of what got me interested. It's something that I've wrestled with, thought about my whole life, particularly as a woman in tech. I was curious about what the impact was on people who might be underrepresented in various aspects of technology. And I don't know. Josh and I learned a lot in terms of doing the research to put this talk together. It's
Awesome.
so yeah, I just got more interested. The more I learned, the more I wanted to know.
Yeah. Are there any like big takeaways that you got from it that are like, I forget what the word, but that's like noteworthy that you would like put in a blurb somewhere, like a vanity metric, I guess.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Be profound, Amy. Be profound.
Yeah. Well, the statistic that surprised me the most, I assumed, and this is the safe space. I assumed this was a bit more of a woman problem, right?
Okay.
I thought that we had been wired and socialized. I'm a pretty confident person.
Hmm.
I joke, I'm not passive aggressive. I'm aggressive aggressive.
Me
But
too.
highly relatable.
Yeah.
And so I thought, okay, this isn't, but yet this still plagues me. So this has to be something we're socialized into. When we did our research, what we found is it actually statistically impacts men and women the same. People who identify as male or female the same.
Hmm.
But it is circumstantial. The part where it makes things stand out is if you are in any circumstance where you're underrepresented or
Okay.
you feel like other, then that's when you're more likely to have basically an attack of the imposter syndrome. That's
Okay.
that's where you start to doubt yourself. So that was,
Interesting.
yeah, that was a surprise to me. So
Yeah.
in theory, like if you were a dude going into a mother's group, for instance, you're just as likely to have that, and again, I'm picking the words carefully. You're not a parent group, but if you're a dude going into a mom's group, the theory is you're more likely to be affected in that case. So anywhere
Okay.
you're underrepresented, it's more likely, but it does not affect one group more than the other. It's just about representation.
Interesting.
So there's another side of that we looked at with the research that we were doing and in our discussions about this, and this was with the Dunning-Kruger effect. And it also comes in that as you progress in your career and you're learning and you're gaining more knowledge and expertise, like you hit this peak. And what did you call it, Amy? Peak
It's
amount.
Mount Stupidity. Mount
Yeah.
Stupidity is like when you're
Yeah.
young and fresh and you can do anything and there's nothing that can conquer you. Then you
Yeah.
plant your flag firmly in Mount Stupidity because you don't even know what you don't know. But it's
Yeah.
a great time to be alive, right? Because you're fearless. And we need that, right? We need that energy to kind of guide us into new things.
Yeah.
But dot, 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 cue the music.
Yeah.
Go on, Josh. Yeah. What happens
Yeah.
next?
So the net result is like with Dunning-Kruger, people who are really poorly estimate their actual knowledge and capability. And it actually occurs a lot because of a lack of self-awareness and understanding that you know they see the pool and they see it as shallow when it can actually be super super deep, but
Okay.
that over time, once you realize that you don't know quite as much as you do know, um, and so this is an offshoot of Dunning-Kruger. It's not strictly clinical identification here, but over time, the more you learn, the more you realize there is to learn and the nuance that's associated with it, and so you
Okay.
become better at estimating your actual knowledge and awareness and capability, and that I think that's also a place where the confidence comes in. So this is one of the areas. So we spoke with a group recently who are a very accomplished group, right? They're huge contributors to a community. They each have had their own individual successes, but this conversation resonated for them because they can look at their peers and feel less than. They can look at their own accomplishments and feel that those accomplishments were um, small in comparison of what they would maybe measure a great accomplishment. Um, and so it's really important to know that this is a situation that you can deal with your entire life. It never stops.
Hmm.
Well, and the other thing we should say about the Dunning-Kruger effect was that right after you plant your flag in Mount Stupidity, oftentimes either it's helpful society or you figure this out that you may not know all that you think you know, and that can topple you into the pit of despair as they mark it on the chart. So, unfortunately, imposter syndrome, thankfully, we have chutzpah that gets us to the Mount Stupidity. We try new things. Then we
Yeah.
realize how much we don't know. And sometimes we over rotate. And that's sort of where you kind of overlay Dunning-Kruger, the impact of you think you know more than you do. You fall into
Okay.
the pit of despair. But then as you, to Josh's point, as you gain more knowledge, you start to become, it goes to real mastery. So it's like a high point, a low point, and then most folks like escalate, right? They pull themselves out of the pit of despair. What we want is to help people not constantly pitch into the pit of despair and get stuck
Yeah.
there,
Yeah.
right? We want to throw a rope to those folks, and to not jump in the pit of despair needlessly, because to Josh's point, so often we're looking along feeling good, and then that FOMO kicks in, right? Or
Yeah.
that comparison is the way to misery, because we can't see ourselves as qualified as we see our peers. And that's where, and again, it is, these are clinical terms, and
Yeah.
neither Josh nor I are clinical psychologists. So if somebody's really struggling with that,
Yeah.
that's something they would have to delve into more deeply. If you are kind of stricken with this from time to time, this is first aid. First aid's a perfect term for it, because we can all apply band-aids and some boo-boo cream, as we call it in my house, right? We can all help. And that's what we try to get people to help identify in themselves and others. Kind of, where do you sit on Dunning-Kruger, and have you launched yourself needlessly in the pit of despair, and how can we pull you back out?
I will say that that sounds like weirdly familiar to kind of how I got started with SoSplush. Is someone told me that I was an awful designer, and so I just got really depressed, and I got really depressed, and I just spent like 48 hours straight just like watching anime, and I was like, I'm just gonna start making things that make me feel better, and then I like launched it online, and here we are today. But that's just so wild.
But and it's so telling, isn't it? And it's not like there were 30 people that said this. One voice, one
One
negative
person.
voice,
Yeah.
right? I'm right with you. I have a cooking blog, and one person gave me hideous feedback, and it took me offline for years, right? I didn't want to produce
Yeah.
food, talk about food, etc. And it was one person,
Yeah.
as opposed to the other people who were like, wow, I really enjoy what you write down.
Right.
And who cares? In the end, it was a way for me to mark recipes to keep for my kids. So it had a
Yeah.
whole different purpose. And I lost that mission. So yeah, why do we let one person almost pick us up and throw us into the pit of despair?
Yeah. Was it a random person online, or was it
It's somebody
someone
I
you
know.
knew?
It's somebody
Okay.
I know. Yeah.
It was
So
And
not
that's
me.
something.
it's not Josh.
So that's something that's similar between you and I as well. Is it was someone that like I really looked up to and really like trusted, and like I was like, yeah, and I think that's why it hurts so much, is
Yeah.
because someone that we somehow put our trust in was
Yes.
just like, oh, this is terrible, you're bad, and it's like, maybe I am, yeah.
Yeah.
But
So that actually hits on something that's really important about imposter syndrome. Like in the clinical definition, again, we're not clinicians, like we're not therapists or psychologists, right? Um, it is that fear of being exposed as a fraud, right? And what I find is really interesting today is that opportunity for so many people to put their interests out, put their effort and energy out, and like by doing that, you're setting yourself up for critique, right? That's
yeah.
inevitable. Um, and you have to learn to build some defense against that. So interestingly enough, correlating Amy stopping her food blog, I lost a lot of weight. She starts her food blog up again, and I start gaining weight. So
We don't want to point fingers,
so
but
nobody, no, not everybody thinks Amy is a fraudulent food blogger. Um, but this is actually one of the things. It's like I love this one story that we tell in our talk, and it's about one of my favorite authors, Neil Gaiman, and he is talking about how he is at a cocktail party, and he's conversing with folks, and he strikes up a conversation with another gentleman, and they're talking about how interesting it is being in the world with the name of Neil, because the other man has the name Neil as well.
Yeah.
And in that conversation, other Neil, not Neil Gaiman, other Neil turns and looks. He goes, "I don't even know what I'm doing here. I just went where I was told. That guy invented the artificial heart. That's a Nobel Prize winner. Like I just went where I was told." well, Neil Gaiman turns to him. He's like, "Well, you were the first man to walk on the moon, so that's got to count for something, right?" And so if Neil Armstrong can feel like his accomplishments are less,
Hmm.
and it's somebody that we all look up to and has been an inspiration for now generations of people, right?
Yeah.
Um, if that type of person can feel like their accomplishments are less, we're all potentially susceptible to it.
Yeah. I was, thinking a lot last night, and I was trying to really identify why I've been kind of feeling so down. And what I've kind of boiled it to is, and that I feel like relates to that story because that was something that happened in the past. And I feel like for people, once we achieve something,
Yes.
now the targets move so much farther. And
Yes.
because we're unable to reach that, it's like, well, now we're not good enough. And so, like, having that time to just reflect on what you have accomplished, I think that would be really helpful for a lot of people
Yeah.
Well,
because,
and
yeah.
I love you're talking about how the goalposts move because one of the other. So I'm a late in life soccer player. I just started 2 years ago. Haven't watched my kids play, and I'm not a very good watcher. And reference the previous aggressive. I joined a league and it's co-ed and it's intense and I'm a left-footed striker. I play up front and that's as thankless as playing in the back where everybody judges you if a goal goes in, right? If it
Hmm.
doesn't go in on the other end, everybody judges you. And I repeat, I've only played this sport for 2 years in my entire life. So I'm like a tall U7 playing with people who play for 40 years, right?
Yeah.
And so last night, like I took a shot, and I took the time over quarantine when we couldn't play together to work out. I ran a 5K. I did footwork. I trained to get better to do what I could do
Yeah.
because I really wanted to get better, right? But I had tons of imposter syndrome. Plenty of times I wanted to cry, leave the field. I didn't belong there. Anyway, so I missed a shot, right? I have to, but you got to take a shot to miss a shot. I missed a shot. And to your exact point, like I hate when there's pandering because it is co-ed. And I think they want me to feel better. And they're like, oh, good try. And I was like, that was a terrible try. And to his credit, one of my buddies was like, okay, shitty good try. I was like, no, thank you. I
Yeah.
think I think one of the things about imposter syndrome is probably, you know, we fear that we're not getting honest feedback. And
Yeah.
to your point in your story, Kelly, you put trust in this person and you thought, well, gosh, if I admire them, this has to be honest feedback because, I believe in them. Simultaneously, it's like we won't let ourselves hear anything good. And
Yeah.
then if we question, you've got this other layer, people kind of not wanting us to feel bad, but is it honest? I don't know. Like that is a complicated thing. And one of the things Josh and I talk about is this tag team, having Josh as a longtime friend, trusted counsel. We see the world in very different ways, but we
Hmm.
can speak, we have safety there and we can speak truth to each other. And if it's not my best work, Josh is going to tell me, but he's also going to tell me in a way that I can make it better, right?
Yeah.
Either lighten the moment or just give me a rope to lift me up. And I
Yeah.
think that would be one of our tips is don't keep it to yourself. If you feel that kind of imposter syndrome, these are embarrassing and hard stories to tell oftentimes, right? Both either the thing that caused it or the feeling makes us feel embarrassed. But if you can develop a little bit of a war council around you and share that with somebody, that's how you're going to pull yourself out of it so much faster because that admission and just kind of releasing the shame of it and both having the feeling and then having the imposter syndrome, it's amazing what a trusted soul can do to help give you some clarity.
I like that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and sorry, go
Go
ahead,
ahead.
Kelly.
No, it's fine. Go ahead, Josh.
That's one of the reasons why we talk about Dunning-Kruger with imposter syndrome, because in the IT industry, in particular, we see imposter syndrome rear its ugly head as people are moving through that cycle, as they
Hmm.
take on a new technology, as they learn something, and then as they gain success or notoriety or successes with that technology, and then what happens right after that. And so those, to Amy's point, having someone that it can be a touchstone, right, that can kind of ground you and keep you honest with yourself and
Hmm.
honest with you know, I guess how others may perceive and see it as well. Um, and so that helps you better estimate what your capabilities are, better grasp and understand the impact of your contributions and the things that you've done, and then more importantly, have someone let you know that it's okay to accept it.
Yeah.
It's okay to accept that you've done something really good and you can move on, right? And work towards whatever the next thing is.
And the goals will change. I mean, that was in some ways that the soccer story, it's literal goals, right? I didn't
Yeah.
have the nerve to even attempt a shot, a year ago. Not even
Right.
close, right? It was pass the ball or try not to get it ripped off of me or just try to receive it or just keep up with the running pack, right?
Yeah.
The amoeba soccer game, right? Just stick with the pack. And it's like Josh said, once you accomplish something, I really believe in mentors, and I think this is where mentors can play such an important role because you get somebody who can teach you something that you don't know, and
Yeah.
that will provide you that feedback because the goals should change. Like you should let us all continue to plant our flag and mount stupid so that we can try new things. Like I'm was a flailing idiot on a soccer pitch the first time. I was off sides, I fell down, like it goes on and on and on, right? Terrible. I can't describe how terrible it was. And yet you show up, you show up, you show up, eventually you get in the pit of despair because you're like, oh, I'm never going to get any better. But you know what? It happens. And for me, it happened literally overnight where people even notice it now. But I have mentors. There's a couple people who took pity, who could see that I was trying really hard, and they said, if you only did this, then this would be enough, right? This would be enough. And you need that kind of supportive mentor who's going to push you a little bit, but reassure you that you have the right to be there, that you are contributing, and what you have is valuable, and you're building on a strong base. And I think if people can offer that feedback, then you're in good position.
Do you think that the way that the tech industry is, I guess, structured almost contributes to imposter syndrome having the hold that it does?
Yes.
And I,
Yes.
Yes.
Wait, wait. Is this like a buzzer? I feel like I'm playing a game show. Like, yes.
well, immediately when you were thinking about that, like the thing that came to my mind is like even with programming languages and how new frameworks are coming out and new this and new that, it's almost like by introducing this new stuff, it's not helping the situation, and I feel like it's almost shortening the attention spans of
Well,
our self-confidence. It's
yeah,
like,
I'm with you. I think the bigger problem there is less the constant shifting, but it's the fact that so much of the tech industry is looked at as if it's a meritocracy, as
yeah,
if it's
Yes.
just the effort and the energy that you put in is like all that matters. And if you haven't done X amount of that language or done this or done that, then both your opinion, your output is total shit. Um, it, it's toxic is actually the problem.
Yes.
Is that it's toxic,
mm,
and then as a result, it fosters doubt. Um, you know, I I've run into this scenario, and Amy was sharing hers. I can share my big one. I was invited to an event a few years ago called the DevOps Enterprise Forum. It is my favorite event every single year.
yeah,
This is where Gene Kim, one of the authors of the Phoenix Project and the author of the Unicorn Project, um, and he runs the DevOps Enterprise Summit. Like this guy's a big deal, right? He invited me to participate in this forum, and I remember sitting there on the first day and just looking around, thinking, "The hell am I doing here?" Right? I do not belong in the rarefied air of the thought leaders and just the sheer capacity of knowledge and
yeah,
respect that this room has. And I'm literally sitting there all through breakfast, just struggling with this, right? Hardcore imposter syndrome. And then I stopped. I'm like, is Gene Kim an idiot? No, he's not an idiot,
yeah,
right? I need to trust that he saw something that I didn't see, that he
yeah,
understands something that I didn't yet understand. My job here is to find that,
yeah,
right? And to find that with this, like with this group. So I just did my fourth year. Again, it's my favorite event. Every year I stress. I'm like, please invite me back. Um,
Yeah.
Gene, it's okay if there comes a time that you need to move on. I understand, but it, but it has been a thing, and so I feel that way less. And I
Yeah.
actually have found in the last 2 years, I look at the new people, and I start conversations with them, and I make a point to let them know that you're here for a reason, and I look forward to talking to
Yeah.
you and hearing your experience and your insights, because man, like it just roots into you if you don't um if you're not mindful about it and
Yeah.
then actively work against it.
And if you have the good fortune of being part of a group like that, where there's a drive to inclusivity and learning from the group.
Yeah.
Because Kelly, to your point, I think unfortunately, particularly where a lot of what we do is very solo, it's very individualized, that it can be self doubt can creep in, that
Hmm.
people, the bad actors, if you will, and they
Yeah.
exist, make you want to, they're invested in going up by standing on your shoulders or making you feel less than you are. So
Yeah.
I think that's something that we have to identify. And again, to Josh's point, I think the word is apt: toxic, right? Whenever you encounter, if that toxic culture exists in a place, then absolutely it's a tag team sport to get out of it, to prevent yourself from sinking into it, and to not fall prey to the urge to repeat the bad behavior oneself, right? Because the last thing you want to do is get into that kind of dogfight and only feel better by virtue of tearing somebody else down. And I have to assume that folks end up I have to assume some of those bad actors have a lot of self doubt, or they wouldn't need to tear other people down. Because criticism that is constructive is one thing. Criticism that is just for the sake of tearing holes doesn't progress our industry, doesn't progress careers, doesn't help anything. It is just flat out toxic.
So, do you have any advice for, I guess, everyone in their career in tech to kind of not be that bad actor? Because it sounds a lot easier than it is, right? But when you get into, the arena, and I feel like the defense mechanism can almost kick in, and some people, and that can be toxic sometimes.
I,
So,
I think there's one really easy thing that everybody can do, and it's something that is it's a very simple thing to keep in mind. It's not binary, right? It's
Mhm.
not either you win and they lose, or you win or you lose and they win. Like every more than one person can win and succeed and be better. It's not a binary situation. Everyone can have opportunities, and you don't have to put down in order to try to get yourself to move forward. I
mhm.
think that's the very first thing I would say.
Back to the O's and the ones, right? The very basis.
That's it. Well, and then
Developers love that.
yeah, I also very much subscribe to the Bill and Ted principle. Just be excellent to one another. Bill and Ted 3 coming September 1st to streaming and theaters where they may be open.
One would
Um,
think you had a role in it. That was so.
Yeah.
yeah.
The Splunk
Um,
people are going to be really mad that you knew that more than when Splunk Conf was. Just
well,
putting that out there.
Splunk Conf is October 20th to the 21st. It is a virtual event. Everyone will love it.
Is everyone invited?
Yes, you can register now at conf.splunk.com.
Oh,
Sorry,
but
Liz.
but I think I think those are great points. I think that anytime we've all been there, we have all had that darkness when we are dark but mad, and the way to feel better is to want to put somebody else down, or even if it's in our own head, right? And God forbid it come out of our mouths. But I think we're all responsible for acting better, right?
Mhm.
And one of the easiest ways for me, I totally agree with Josh, like it's never binary. One of the easiest ways for me is either a, depending on where you are in your career and your Dunning-Kruger journey of getting expertise, you should either be looking for help, so finding a mentor, finding connections, learning, or you should be helping. So if you're always doing one of those two things, then that puts you in a different mindset than
Hmm.
kind of Lone Ranger-esque, activity. So if
Yeah.
you're either learning or helping people learn, then you're always either asking for a rope to come out of the pit of despair, or you're throwing somebody one. And that can keep you from pushing people into the pit of
Yeah.
despair.
That's great advice. Awesome. So I guess we can start wrapping it up. Is there anything that you would like to add, or anything you want to throw out to people who are watching?
Yeah. One of the things with this, and again, we framed it as a first aid kit. So I'll just give you two tidbits, not all of them.
Okay.
You'll find
Save
the
it for the show.
presentation later.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
right. Um, Look at whether or not someone is discounting praise, right?
Mm.
For
Yeah.
work that they've done. First off, if they're like, "Oh, it was no big deal," and then like, "No, it was a big deal." Like, "No, that was really important and it was impactful." Like,
Yeah.
make sure that remind people that the work that they put in warrants praise. Like they've earned
Because
it, they
that's a
deserved
symptom.
it,
Right. That's
right?
a symptom. That's a good way to identify it in yourself and others. If you see a lot of deferring, when you know
Yeah.
there were real accomplishments.
Yep, and that also applies if they are a part of a team that was successful. It's very easy, and we see this in sports, less so in the professional sports because they're all working on their contract value, and that's understandable, right? Nothing derogatory there. But when working as a team, it's very easy to diminish the contributions that you had. And I'm not encouraging you to overinflate the contributions, but work to be realistic on the contributions that you made and how it affected the and impacted the outcome, because in the end, imposter syndrome can also affect your growth and your livelihood and how you succeed at work. So um
Definitely.
yeah, it's good to be mindful of these things and try not to let yourself fall into these traps.
I
So,
like it.
one other tip I would have is think about it in two lenses. This is another test we ask people to take, which is think about something you tried and were scared about in your professional life versus something you tried and were scared about, say, a hobby. And I use that hobby example here, right, with soccer in your personal life. Oftentimes, I've noticed we do have imposter syndrome in our personal lives and various things we try, but it's somehow less monumental and less condemning than what
Hmm.
we do in our professional lives. So sometimes, if you just run it through the filter of how would I feel if this were a personal thing and not a professional thing, you can get a little more gauge on whether you're overreacting. Um,
Hmm.
because which sounds harsh, but in some ways that's what imposter syndrome is, right? It's a
Yeah.
terrible story we tell ourselves, and then we're convinced we're a phony. And if you run it through those two lenses, oftentimes you're able to get it a little bit. So that's a band-aid you
Yeah.
can put on yourself, right?
Do you think that's almost because of survival instincts and the professional life being so linked to your ability to provide for you and your family?
I
And so,
we I'm not sure we came up with an answer. What do you think, Josh? Like, because we talked about it, and both of us noticed in ourselves when we did the presentation initially, we both saw examples that we gave professionally and hobby wise,
Yeah.
and the sting of it just wasn't so much there. I mean, we were embarrassed, or we were understood we were learning, or we felt a little like, oh, I wish I was better at this faster in our
yeah.
personal hobbies. But yeah, it feels, I guess you're right, like you're the breadwinner, or you're somehow it becomes really, and that was part of the first aid. We realized how
Yeah.
cataclysmic it was
Yeah.
becoming in our heads, right, when it was work related, and we couldn't even put a finger on really why.
I think so. I I've thought about this a lot in the last couple of years. I look over at my shelf here, and I've got several awards that I've won, and they were awarded to me like 3 years ago. And I sometimes worry and fear that I am still coasting on that success and not continuing to grow. That maybe I don't deserve to go farther. Um, I know better.
Mhm.
right? I know better than that, yet that thought
Yeah.
continues to grow because it was like, well, I haven't won an award in 3 years.
Right.
Maybe I've peaked.
That's
Yeah.
exactly that's the
Maybe I've
phrase in
reached
my head.
yeah,
Yep.
maybe I've reached peak Josh,
Yep.
and I will not be like Meryl Streep and just continue. Right? I've gone peak Josh, never going to happen again. Um,
Yeah.
I don't believe that in my heart of hearts, but it is a thought that continually creeps up. Um,
Hmm.
and but here's the interesting bit to that. I also have to remind myself that the me that earned those awards was doing a vastly different type of work. Right now,
Okay.
my actual focus is I want everybody on my team to be going out
Yeah.
and earning awards. Like
Yeah.
that's the measure of success that I'm going for now. And that helps me so much that, it's like it's not about what I'm trying to do for myself or whatever my own glory. No, I want that for other people in the organization. And so I've had to put a lot of thought into this, and it's one of the reasons why Amy and I, you know, tackled this as a topic.
Yeah.
And that made me think of the other analogy there, which is, and Kelly, you brought this up early on, and we're in an industry where you're meant to layer on. And like when you learn something and you get better,
Yeah,
the challenges get harder. What was acceptable before becomes, it's not cute anymore. It's got to be more, more, more.
Yeah.
And again, it's the soccer nut that I am. When you watch Lionel Messi play, and many people argue he's possibly the best in the world, he doesn't have one person defending him. He has 3 to 5 people defending him.
Yeah.
So what maybe he got away with when he was 11, and even then people were having trouble. Like now, as a seasoned player, in the maybe the peak of his career, it's
Yeah.
harder. It's harder because everybody knows who Messi is.
Yeah.
And I think that maybe that is, whereas in our hobbies we can switch on and off, we don't have to do them maybe as in public as some things. It's a good question, but somehow in professional life it's usually a group sport.
Yeah.
You have to be in public in some means of that word.
Yeah.
And goal just sometimes it feels like it just keeps getting pushed further away right when you master
Yeah.
something, especially in our industry, right? It gets pushed a little bit further, or another defender gets set upon you, so you're like, oh, just got harder.
Yeah, something I actually heard in a podcast, I can't remember which one, but it was talking about like your first 100 days on the job. And
Mm,
it basically started out with this analogy that when you start a job, you have X amount of I'm new credit. So anytime you make a mistake, you just pull out like the credit card and you're like, oh, sorry, I'm new. And so kind of in the same vein where when you're new, you don't have as much pressure on you, but then once run out of credit, it's like you can't use that excuse anymore, and that goalpost does move. Yeah.
and I think that's probably when I just like that really resonated with me, that analogy. And that's when that fear of I don't belong,
Yeah.
right? It's one thing you forgive yourself,
Yeah.
as long as you've got that credit card. And then when it's
Yeah.
not there, you're like, it's got to be me. It's got to be me, and I'm never going to succeed. And
Yeah.
which, of course, is the exact opposite of, like we said at the top, it's exact opposite of what you need to be thinking. It's the
Right.
exact moment you need to, even if it's false confidence. So,
Definitely. Awesome. Well, so we have a comment in the chat. M. Jean Schmidt says, agree with that. Learning or helping others definitely changes the mindset. Um, do we have any questions in the chat? I'll give them like a minute or two to respond. And then, Josh, do you want to add anything to that while we wait for any questions or comments?
I think the comment in the chat kind of falls in line with the train of thought that I had, as I try to navigate what the next 5 years of my career might look like. What is going to be my success? I think my success is going to be building other people up and helping others reach success, right? And um, it's a completely different mindset, different skill set, very much fill out of my league a lot of
Yeah.
times. But at the same time, I just finished a leadership training course, and I was asked to come back and be a trainer in management training course
That's awesome.
for the next round of trainees. So
Yeah.
that was a nice validation. And now I sit here and like I don't know that I'm supposed to be here or not. Right? It's a cycle. It's a
Yeah,
cycle.
it
So
is.
but I go back to, I'm like, do I think these people are stupid? No, I don't think they're stupid. I'm gonna trust that
Yeah.
they're giving me honest and legitimate feedback,
Yeah.
and helping me better assess and understand my capabilities and my potential,
Yeah.
versus me being stuck on my own Dunning Kruger, and getting wrapped in my own head.
Yeah. Going back to that comment you made earlier, Amy, about public speaking being a prime example of when imposter syndrome hits. I did a podcast interview with Chloe Condon, and one of her pieces of advice was, Kelly, nobody wants you to fail. Like
Nope.
when you're up on the
Yes.
stage, she was using this, auditioning for a part. She's like, the director and the casting people, like, they want you to do well. They
Yep.
want to like they have every hope and motivation. The people standing in the crowd, they don't want you to fail. And so it's like, ever since then, it's just every time I've had those little voices, kind of the same thing where these people, the whole like, these people aren't stupid, all of this stuff. It's the same thing where it's like, people want you to do well.
Yeah.
And so just telling myself that over and over, Kelly, like whenever I'm going for a job, Kelly, they want to hire someone. They want you to do well.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The best example the best example that I've ever seen. It was in a lightning talk in DevOps Days, Detroit, I think in 2016. I'm specific, so you can look to see if there's a video. But in the lightning talk, it was how to contribute to the community by giving talks at DevOps Days.
Yeah.
And the gentleman was giving it. He's like 2.5 minutes in. This next slide comes up, it's completely blank. And he's like, "Oh, I geez, sorry, I don't know what happened here." Because 15 seconds, right? It's auto
Yeah.
rotating. The next one
Yeah.
come up, he goes, "Notice, no one threw anything at me. Nobody booed at me. Nobody,
Yeah.
told me I needed to get off the stage. It's because everybody is rooting for you and they want
Yeah.
you to succeed." So he planted a mistake to
Yeah.
demonstrate
Oh,
what
nice.
people do when the mistakes happen.
Yeah.
So, and he's spot
That's
on,
awesome.
right?
Yeah.
Stuff happens. People want you to be successful. Um, they want to see you thrive and excel.
And
Awesome.
something somebody else told me way back when on a Geek Whispers podcast, if you're invited to speak, you're the expert there. And just
Yeah.
keep telling yourself that. If you've been,
Mhm.
once you've been invited, and it's what you were saying, Josh, like you have to assume the founders, the people who are organizing the conference, no, they're not, like, you haven't snowed everybody, right? The
Yep.
Holden
Yeah.
Caulfield is not in the building, right?
Yeah.
You're not a phony. Um, it, just assume that you are the expert for that moment in that time, and just say what you say, know what you know, do your research and prepare. But you've been asked based on their knowledge of what you know.
Definitely.
And
That's awesome.
my one last tip, because
Sure.
this is something I do, is go be a great audience member. There is such power in going and be that face. I sometimes just will to power somebody who might be nervous or struggling.
Yeah.
I've sat with executives before they've gone on big interviews. I've done a lot of this.
Yeah.
And I want somebody to, sometimes they just need somebody to sit quietly. Sometimes they need somebody to go grab coffee.
Yeah.
It can be figure out what their needs are, and then sit in that audience and make eye contact with them, and you are
Yeah.
safe space for them in a crowd. And that's something all of us can do, is go be great audience members for a
Yeah.
talk, big, small, or whatever. You can support somebody.
One of the books I was actually required reading for my religious studies degree, it was called How to Be the Perfect Stranger.
Ooh.
And it was all about going into places where, you're a stranger, but being a good stranger, like being like, don't take away from the event, if anything, at least just leave it net neutral,
Yeah. I love that.
Yeah, so definitely check that out.
It's also critical to being a good party crasher.
Yeah.
So true.
Yeah. But
I'm putting
awesome.
that on my Twitter profile now. I'm a good stranger.
Do it. Well, thank you so much for being on. I
Yeah.
really appreciate it. This has been so insightful. I know that I've taken away a lot of good things from it, and I've seen how it's impacted my life specifically. And I hope that everyone watching has also done the same. So thank you so much, Amy and Josh. I really appreciate it. Um, uh, I hope to talk to you all soon. And thanks again.
Thanks, Kelly.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
thanks.